Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of r/Malicious Compliance. In today's episode, forced to sing the German anthem. Welcome to the unending notebook emporium. Won't deliver my full order? Have it your way. You want a policy, I'll give you a policy. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. Forced to sing the German anthem. Wanted to share the malicious compliance of my schoolmates and myself. Some time ago my colleagues and I attended a German school in Asia. We're expats. Every Monday morning all students had to stand and sing the German anthem. My mates and I are all Swiss, and so we refused. It got us to the principal. Our parents had to come to the principal's office to talk about our disrespect to the school's tradition. Of course our parents were furious about the arrogance and expectation that foreign students have to sing the German anthem. After a lot of arguing and even a strong-worded written letter by multiple parents to the principal, the expectation was still that we have to sing. So QR compliance. Next Monday morning all Swiss students in the building stood up, and when the hymn was played, we all sang the first strophe of the German anthem. Note that it was the very strophe that was used prior up to 1945. The teachers were powerless since we complied to their demands, and being forced to sing the German hymn as Swiss student didn't go so well with the Swiss ambassador. Our parents contacted the embassy after being told if we don't comply we will be punished. Be assured, we were never again asked to sing the German anthem. And since the ambassador had a chat with his German counterpart, the principal and two of the teachers that insisted the most and disrespected our parents were fired from that school. Seems like forcing students by punishment to sing a hymn isn't much appreciated by the school board nor the embassies. Welcome to the unending notebook emporium. When I was a student, I earned some extra money by working in a stationery shop in a university town. I only worked at weekends, and since there were no deliveries or post-lecture rushes, we usually had 3 of us on duty. At first, it was me, Electron, a physics student with little time for humans, and Josh, the weekend manager. Josh was a surfer dude, always really relaxed, knew that most of the job was bullsh*t, and freely told us that the only thing he liked was chatting with us and the customers. We developed a great group of repeat customers who liked the store being quieter and being able to talk to us about whatever problem they had. On that basis, Josh had agreed a policy whereby the weekday team did all the scheduled tasks when there were more staff on duty, but on weekends all we did was filling empty shelves and sales. Unfortunately, Josh's main job as a water sports instructor was really taking off, and his days of selling paper clips were over. Neither I nor Electron had any interest in being responsible for keys, cash balancing, and explaining to sketchy folk why we'd stop selling those little resealable plastic bags, so we didn't inquire about the weekend manager job, and we weren't asked either. Apparently a weekday worker, Susan, wanted the hours. I liked Susan. She often took weekend shifts when one of us was out of town, and she blended in well with our team. But a storm was brewing. The owner had decided that weekend manager was a pointless job title, and that an experienced salesperson could handle the weekend crew. So when Susan was offered the opportunity to run the weekend team, it was not on the management pay scale, it was with a $1 per hour supplement. I genuinely did feel sorry for her. Neither me nor Electron would have taken on the responsibility for $8 more per shift. She negotiated him up to $1.50 per hour, but most importantly for her, agreed that though contractually she'd be a salesperson, at weekends she must be referred to as manager. I know, because she spent the first month drilling this point home, and she printed out a special badge that said manager, then got upset when the store's assistant manager, Alice, told her she wasn't allowed to wear it on weekdays. This created a rift that Alice never forgot. Alice told us, when covering one weekend, that Susan had also promised everyone that she would whip the weekend team into shape and that Josh had allowed us to become lazy. Alice thought the whole thing was hilarious, and said that it was pointless anyway. The owner had far bigger priorities than this store, and as long as we were ticking over a profit, he really couldn't care less about the sales volumes from one week to the next or who worked what shift. To get Susan out of his hair, he'd agreed that if she boosted sales in her first 2 months, she'd get a reward, and wouldn't you know, in the first 2 months, which happened to be a new academic year, sales were indeed boosted. She got a $25 gift voucher for another store he owned, and she told Electron and me that it was a clear example of how hard work pays off. We simply needed to apply ourselves and follow her instructions. One Sunday, I was talking to a student who wanted to buy a USB stick for their university work. I was talking about how to back up your data, and that a single USB stick might not be sufficient. Electron was explaining something that I didn't understand to someone who I also could not understand. Susan emerged from the small office at the back of the store, where she had started to spend most of her time working on the system. It was very unclear what the system did, or why it had worked so effortlessly during Josh's tenure and now required constant babysitting, but her time with the system was unavoidable and critical to our success. "This shelf isn't full," she said to the open floor. I turned around, and she was pointing at a shelf of notebooks. The owner had struck a killer deal on multiple pallets of garishly colored notebooks, and now we had thousands of them in the stockroom. The weekday team had put about 100 of them onto a shelf, but as they were cheap and selling quickly, a fairly noticeable gap had developed. Normally I'd grab some when I happened to go into the stockroom for something else, but that hadn't happened in a while. I went back to talking to the customer, but then she grabbed my shoulder and jerked it back. "Bobby Bumblebee," she said. "When I ask a question, I expect a response." The young guy I was talking to looked horrified and started to back away. "Are you buying that?" she asked him, pointing at the USB stick in his hands. He shook his head, muttered something apologetically, and put it back on the shelf before rushing out of the shop. "Another time waster," she said to me. "No more wasting time on chat. You're either at the register selling, or you're filling shelves. We've got plenty of notebooks in the stockroom, and there's no excuse for empty shelves. I expect every space filled." She turned and marched back to the little office. She looked over at Electron, and pointed at him. "That goes for you, too, Electron." He looked back at her with a look of total confusion, but he usually did, so it didn't stand out. Then, as she slammed the office door behind her, a light bulb went off in my head. "Electron," I said, "did you hear her say every space?" He nodded, and started to smile. He apologized to his customer for no longer being permitted to talk to them, and we started a Herculean tag team effort in the stockroom. I brought out the first batch on the trolley and filled the notebook shelf. It looked pretty good. We were waiting for a shipment of printer paper, so there was a big gap in that section. Not anymore. I stacked those notebooks a yard high. I thought Susan might hear the noise and come out, but she was far too busy. Electron spent some time manning the register, but mostly we were filling shelves. Until, eventually, we had filled the shelves. It looked like a kid had eaten a pack of highlighters and spewed across the entire store. I realized, though, that she'd said every space, not every shelf. I created a new tower near to the office door. It was a majestic sight, almost 6 feet high in the center. Electron crowned it with a roll of sparkly glitter tape. To me, it was my Washington monument. It was at this point that I heard it. What the hell? See, the one thing I knew that no one else did was that Alice was coming in at the end of the day to collect some paperwork. "Welcome to the unending notebook emporium," I said. I then told Alice how we had been berated earlier in the day, and that we were now following Susan's strict instructions. Thankfully, Alice thought this was hilarious. She did ask, though, how Susan had failed to notice what we were doing. "She's been working on the system for the last 3 hours," I explained. Alice went up to the door, but rather than knocking on it, she just flung it open. Susan had been sitting on the office chair, with her feet on the desk, reading a novel, but had jolted herself so violently that the chair had shot out from behind her and she was now rolling around on the floor. Alice closed the shop, told Electron and me that she'd get things straightened out and we should report as usual the following weekend. I wish I could say that Susan was fired, and that Alice had taken over weekend management, but for some reason Alice and the store manager decided to give her a second chance. Susan did have to stay late to move all of the notebooks spread across random shelves to my notebook tower, though I must say with less architectural flair than I had done. It still stood, although slightly diminished, a week later when I came back for my next shift. I've no idea what was said to Susan after the store closed, but she never wore the badge or shouted again. She also spent a lot more time on the floor, and started to give us extremely clear instructions with absolutely no ambiguity. This was a great source of amusement for Electron, who occasionally played up to it, my personal favorite being when he asked if selling as much printer ink as possible meant he should lower the price to 1 cent. A few months later, both Electron and I finished our degrees and left. Neither of us worked in retail again. Electron went on to gain a PhD in physics and we are still in touch, but I still have no idea what he is talking about or what he does for a living. Alice later took over as the store manager, and Susan, as far as I can make out, left a couple of years after me and now works as the assistant manager of a nearby supermarket. I like to think that she treats people better now, but who knows? At the very least, I hope that every time she sees a notebook she remembers the day she spawned the unending notebook emporium. Won't deliver my full order? Have it your way. So I used to live on Azores and work as an adventure guide. In my work we use action cameras to capture our guests in the moment. The Azores island is the adventurer's mecca, its raw nature. Waterfalls etc., and it would be difficult and even dangerous to take pictures/videos while dangling in a rope from a 30m high waterfall during canyoning, for example. It also allows the guests to enjoy the activities 100%. Anyways, it was Black Friday and I found a great deal on a kit for water sports that included a case, hand straps, a floating handle, case etc. from the same manufacturer of the action camera. So I know it's quality stuff. Here is the problem. Azores is a small island in the mid/North Atlantic Ocean. So packages that get sent to this island sometime takes a month or more to deliver, and it doesn't help that the local post carrier is terrible to deal with. Everything is handled manually, so things takes time. So a month goes by and I finally get a letter in the box saying I have a parcel waiting at the postal office. I grab my bike and make my way down to collect it. I get home and notice that half of the stuff I ordered is missing for some reason. I jump on the customer support and ask why they have not delivered everything. They explained that there was a mistake, so I said that it was no worries, he could just send me the missing items and we call it a day. He said that this was a kit and that he couldn't just send me the items separately for some reason. So I said okay, then just refund me for the missing items then. Hayden tells me that the items are worth more separately, so he can't refund for the missing items. He then goes on to explain that in order for him to refund me I would have to return the package that I already received. And that way I could just reorder it again. However, I pointed out that now the kit sells for 25% more than what I paid for it. So how did he plan to solve that? He replies and says that he can't give me a coupon, but the best he could do was to give me a €10 credit. But this would still mean that I had to pay more for the same kit. At this point I was fuming and frustrated, so I just told him to email me a return label and tell him how terrible this experience had been. I hung up the phone and packaged up everything again, printed the label and went back to the postal office to send it away. Malicious compliance. Because I really needed these items, I thought I might as well reorder it, just like the guy on customer support said, even if it cost a bit more this time. But this time I decided I would gamble and order it from Amazon instead. You see, fellow Redditors, on my way home from the postal office I remembered that I had previously ordered other stuff from Amazon a few months prior, and I remembered that I was able to collect a full refund because they couldn't deliver on the set date, due to me living on a remote island and the local postal service took forever to deliver. I jump on Amazon, find out that the company has an Amazon store. I put all the items I needed and a little extra stuff that I wanted for my camera, and press order. And just as I thought expected delivery 2 weeks from now, there is literally no way that they can deliver in that time. 3 weeks goes by and I hop on Amazon to watch the status on my order, and wouldn't you know, a glorious little button has appeared saying that I'm eligible for a refund as the package seems to have gone missing. Fast forward 1 week later. I get a knock on my door. It's the delivery man from the postal service and a box with a smile in his hand. I thank him, close the door and rip the parcel open. Everything is there. I received a full refund of €200. And a week later I got a full refund for the first delivery that I sent back, plus a credit of €10 to use on their website. So all in all, they lost almost €350 in camera gear worth around €200 instead of refunding me the difference or send me the missing items. You want a policy? I'll give you a policy. A few years ago, I was working in the compliance team for a large NGO. I had covered a few roles in this team and was largely left to get on with my work by my managers and SLT as they trusted me. One of the big parts of the role was approving requests for information internally. Much of this was quite mundane, but the rules were there for good reasons. For example, you don't really want your manager to have access to your emails. Even if someone needs access, it should be HR with a reasonable reason given and rules surrounding it. Anyway, cut to the situation. A manager in the fundraising team who just had a staff member in his team leave messaged me telling me he needed ongoing access to the staff member's email account for the next 6 months. I told him I couldn't do this without a good reason. For example, the business risk, they had been fired, so there wasn't a handover. For context, I was a supervisor, so the slightly junior. He then told me to come to his desk and proceeded to tell me he wanted to see a policy before the end of the day, otherwise he would go to my manager. I knew my manager would back me up, but he had raised a good point that it wasn't an official policy. The tone of the exchange was patronizing and superior. So it was in this context I decided to go to my desk and write the policies. I dropped my manager an email explaining I had identified a gap in our policies relating to manager email access, explaining I wasn't busy and telling them I could sort it out by the end of the day. The policy was, I believe, a balanced and proportional policy explaining why unrestricted management email access is a bad business practice, unethical, and should only be done in set conditions carefully regulated. The manager whose patronizing and rude demand for this policy got a copy by the end of the day. I believe the policy is likely still in use. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.